What's up, Star People? It's 11/11. Do you know where your Stellar Trilogy book 3 is? I do. I got it. Okay, so welcome back. It's exactly 11/11, so that means that it's time for Star People story time. And for those of you who will be watching this at a later time and not necessarily live, Star People story time is it happens every day this month of August at 11:11 sharp p.m. and we read a chapter from my book, the Stellar Trilogy, book 3, Light of the War, and we have a good old jolly time. Wait, what's happening? We have a good old jolly time. We started on August 2nd, which was the new moon, and we read the prologue. We read yesterday chapters 1 and 2. And what happened last night, what is going on over here, Becky? Just everybody calm down. Yeah, I know my connection is being stupid. Let me see what's happening with my connection. Hi, Raj. Welcome. Yo, for real, there's like a ghost in my room. I don't know what's happening. What? I didn't have this problem yesterday. Is that going on? Okay. Anyway, and then it's saying my connection is weak. And I'm on Wi-Fi. I don't know. So anyway, what happened yesterday, we read chapters 1 and chapter 2. And so in chapter 1, Kai was a little apprehensive because it was time for her to leave her family in the glorious Tustai, the awesome, elusive. And if you want to know what Tustai is like, if you want to know what Aphrodisia is like, book 2 has all of that insight. And so she was a little sad about it because she has some history about walking through portals and ending up really pissed. I don't have a ghost. I'm just saying that. It's just a lot going on here. See, I'm the ghost because I talk with my hands. So that happened in chapter 1. Chapter 2, Kai found out she's got a superpower. She can heal Earth's funky water, at least in her Aunt Lara's office. So that was kind of cool to figure out. And so chapter 3 is where we're going to begin today. So I'm going to give everybody like one more minute who were here yesterday or the day before or whatever, just to kind of collect and come back. Just like literally one more minute, and then we're going to get started. So before we start, while we're waiting for the 2 or 3 people that come back on, do you have any questions about what we read last night? Questions? Anyone? Any questions? None? I understand that there's a delay, so I feel weird and awkward because I expect that the answers to my questions are supposed to come up instantaneously, and they don't because there's a delay. So, and that's fine. So I'm just gonna keep stalling like this. Thank God I was a radio personality and a talk show host, because I am really good at just stalling. Okay, we're gonna get started. So chapter 3, Light of the War, the Stellar Trilogy. This chapter is called All Things Made New. Earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life. Earth, teach me resignation as the leaves which die in the fall. Earth, teach me courage as the tree which stands all alone. Earth, teach me regeneration as the seed which rises in the spring. William Alexander. Ooh, what am I doing? Quickly, Lara shuffled each and every being in her office out into the hallway and through the narrow stairwell. They trekked down the steep stairs in a single file, Lara at the helm. They then exited through a slim and somewhat mangled door that squeaked so loudly when it opened, the alley they ended up in sounded like a haunted cave. The squeak, which was more like a horrible squawk, reverberated over and again for a long while until finally that awful sound gave way to the shuffling of feet. It was hard to see. Only a few street lights had working bulbs several blocks up from the alley. When every stye had filled in the space in front of the mangled door, and someone was wise enough to close the door gently or fix it magically with their stye powers, all was quiet except the sounds of breathing. Maybe it was anticipation. Kai was excited. She hadn't known she could do things with her light besides let it pour haplessly out of the front of her face. To be able to purify the water of an entire building and maybe an entire city or even the planet, that was a talent worth having light for. She was safely tucked away in her thoughts when Jasperai said something unintelligible to her, and suddenly something clicked, like a PA system had been switched on in her head. It was disconcerting when finally she could hear everything. She jumped, startled, and then settled in. It turned out all that quiet she thought they were standing in was actually everybody listening to Lara explaining what they were about to do. Since Kai and Jasperai had eaten the Magnani fruit on their wedding day, they acquired the ability to shut off their ability to share their thoughts with other stye. This meant Kai couldn't simply tune into the heads of her family and stye friends like before. She had to give them access to her thoughts to give her access to their thoughts, which she had no real pressing interest in doing. Because Jasperai had access to Kai's thoughts, and he also didn't share Kai's qualms of sharing his thoughts with other stye, if Kai was tuned into Jasperai's head, she could hear what he was hearing, without the commitment of full brain space access for everybody. It wasn't a very stye way to be a part of the tribe, but Kai reasoned that she was only stye in heritage anyway. I've made arrangements for us in this building. I've made arrangements for us in my building, Lara said. Before we left, Sunbim secured the rest of the apartments. As to not arouse too much suspicion, we'll go in through the back door and rest for the evening in the apartments that make up the top floor. Carlos and Darren will be your guides. When the sun rises, you may choose your living companions and your apartments. You'll also be able to explore this world and secure things that will make you most comfortable while you're here. We'll go in groups of 3. Carlos will take one group and Darren the other. I'll take Kairu, Jasperai, and Kaitu. We have different work to accomplish before morning, yes? Lara said. Each person nodded except for Kai. She spoke out loud out of habit, but also because, again, nobody had access to her thoughts. You're taking us home, right? Kaitu and I already have a place, which means, of course, Jasperai does too, she said, kind of smiling. She was hopeful that she would have something familiar to hang on to during this unfamiliar time. Jasperai didn't say anything, though he smiled at Kai gently because he had heard something she hadn't. We'll all be staying as close to each other as possible. It's safer for us all if we stay together. We are Legion. Not to worry. If I'm mistaken, your belongings from your old home have already been transferred to your new home. I'll take you there once we've finished our final task for the night, Lara said. She didn't sound pleasant or peeved. She sounded like she was on a mission, and Kai was acting like a pebble she had to walk over a dozen times to get there. This annoyed Kai for some reason. Earth was her place. She was the one who had lived here her whole life. Did she like it much? No, but that didn't mean she didn't claim it as hers. Wasn't she supposed to be the expert? Or at least asked first before being directed to do something? It didn't matter at this point. Kai hadn't the foggiest idea what she was supposed to do from one moment to the next. She probably had more adjusting to do than any of them. They all got to be stye only. They didn't truly have to adjust to the ways of Earthlings. They weren't here to fit in. They were here to stand out. They were on Earth to be the anchors of the coming changes. Maybe even to be the prototype of what was possible. Kai was an Earthling first. When she learned she was actually stye, the only thing it did was add a dynamic to her earthiness. It didn't change it. No matter how much she tried, she truly was an Earth girl, even when she was in Tuesday with her biological family. Now that she was back on Earth, she still had to be an Earthling, with a bona fide Stye husband, a half Stye Earthling kid, and 2 full Stye kids on the way. Would the twins also be Earthlings? But really Stye too? Lara said they weren't designed for the Earth plane. What did that even mean? Kai's life was confusing from the moment she was born. She had no idea it could get even more confusing just when things started to make sense. For some reason, she wanted to be able to define it, to call it something. Most people could call their lives something specific. Her surrogate parents did. They called their lives regular. Aunt Myra called her life God-fearing. Her foster mother called her life blessed. Even Henny could call his life famous. But Kai couldn't call her life anything specific because it was all over the place. Before, in her Yai, she could define her life as dreamy. Then, when she woke up, her life was a nightmare. Now, even as she looked upon her daughter, her new husband, and her biological family, as real as they were, she couldn't look at her life at the moment and call it anything, except maybe scary. Too many changes were happening. She didn't mind most of them. It was just too soon to feel any kind of way about being married and pregnant in one fell swoop. She was happy before, but now being on Earth and having to define herself and her new life was hard. She would have to change quickly, but she wasn't ready. She had so many questions, but she didn't even know where to begin. She and her family were charged with changing the whole world, which included saving the planet. How would they do that exactly? They were supposed to plant the Magnani tree somewhere, and the Magnani would do the work for the plants. The challenge was where and how. The bigger challenge was what would face them. Her father, the dozen of Durg, something else. All of those questions were swirling around in Kai's head when abruptly Jasper Eye swooped her up in his arms and hugged her tightly. She put her arms around his neck, which caused her legs to lift and wrapped around his waist to fulfill their signature hug. Once she was snugly in place, he whispered gently in her ears, "No worry for you, Kai of Tuesday. Your humanness is a gift to us all. Let's go finish our work and meet our new dwelling," he said, kissing her cheeks. She hugged him for a long while and let the tears of frustration find her cheeks until she had mustered up enough courage to unwrap her legs and let her feet find the ground. She was reminded why she called her husband Mahi. He truly was her he. She held his hand tightly and then Kaitu's on her other side for balance. Without saying anything, Lara led them out of the alley and out to the dark street. Even with the street lamps on, it was hard for her specifically to see in front of her. Maybe it was because her wary tears were still shrouding her eyeballs, or maybe it was because Earth had become much darker than she remembered before she left. Either way, walking down the street was unnerving. The 4 of them were the last group to leave the alley. Kai stretched her eyes to see if she could even see a lagging member of the group that had left before them. She couldn't. She also noticed they weren't walking in the direction of Lara's building, which made her want to throw up. She could have blamed her sudden bout of nausea on her early pregnancy, but she knew it wasn't that. She looked up at the blank sky to give her fears something tangible to hold on to, or maybe to calm her nerves by looking at stars. Of course, there were no stars. Probably all of them had taken on people shapes and were now on their way to Lara's building. It was also a new moon. Of course. The Stye did everything perfectly. What better way to begin a new venture on Earth than to begin at a new moon? Kai remembered momentarily the full red moon during which she, Lara, Kaitu, Carlos, Darren, and Mrs. Kim had left for Tuesday. It was so big and so red, it looked like a huge ball of blood in the sky. It made everything beneath it look like it were on fire or melting. She hadn't been able to watch it long before Mrs. Kim was shuffling them all through the red door, but she remembered that moon because at some point she had to face it herself. But then when she faced it, it turned out to be a water-like red orb that talked. It asked her questions. Well, she asked it questions first, and then it all got weird. "What are you?" she said out loud, not expecting an answer. "I am you," the red-orange orb said. Its voice was tinny, like it was coming from a far-off place surrounded by metal. Kai jumped back. She certainly wasn't expecting the thing to talk back. This was a bit too much, but she had nowhere to go. She couldn't deflect this. She was facing this thing, and they were the only two, wherever they were, which appeared to be nowhere. It was the literal scariest thing Kai had ever experienced. No matter what her fear, no matter how much she didn't want to be in the exact spot she was in, she was all she had in the moment, and she was standing in front of a big, bright ball that talked. Plus, it said it was her. She had two choices: deal or faint. Fainting was her first choice, but her body wasn't cooperating. So she decided instead to attempt to play along. What does one ask a giant ball that looks like it's made of glittery red ocean water? "How are you me when I'm me?" she asked. "How are you me when I am you?" it said. Obviously, this thing had jokes. "What?" Kai asked Clippy. "Yes," it said. "Yes, what?" "I am you. What does that mean for you? Can you see yourself in me?" "I see myself in you," it said. Kai looked more closely at the orb. She still saw her reflection as the orb pulsated and its surface rippled when she blinked. She tried not to blink. She looked as closely as she could, but only saw herself. She wasn't sure what else this thing wanted her to see, so she asked, "If you are me, who am I?" "Yes," the orb said with emphasis. Kai blinked, and the orb's surface rippled, but when it was still again, she looked different. She was compelled to look even closer, and when she did, something in her moved, which caused her to shiver. She had to blink, but when she looked at the orb again and its surface settled, she saw them. She was staring at herself with gorgeous, glittering, raven-colored wings that were unfolding in all their full span of glory. "Wow," she said. Her wings were awesome. "Are these mine?" She wanted to touch them. They were absolutely glorious. But she also wanted to know if she was looking at a ruse of herself. She didn't know if the wings were actually there or just some game the orb was playing with her. She tried to move her arms, but she couldn't, and she couldn't look away. Her eyes were glued to the orb like something had blocked her face on either side. All she could do was face forward. What happened? Wait, what happened? I lost my place. Hold on a second. All she could do was face forward. Okay. The only thing she could do with any amount of emphasis was blink. When she did blink, the orb's surface rippled. When it settled, her hair, which was piled loosely in a messy bun on top of her head, had transformed into a glorious lion's mane of her glossy black curls, well past her shoulders. Perched on her head was a golden crown bejeweled with gems of every color she had never even seen before. The crown sparkled as it reflected through the light of the orb. When she blinked again, the orb rippled and then settled, so Kai could see the 5-point star that made up the entire center of her crown. The bottom of the star rested exactly between her eyes, like they were pointing to them. In the center was a glimmering eye that rested in the middle of her forehead. The more Kai blinked and the surface of the orb rippled and then settled, the more her reflection in the orb changed. The last part of her transformation was her clothes. She was no longer wearing jeans, a fitted t-shirt, and a blazer. She was now wearing a slick black and turquoise catsuit with a holographic star in the center of her chest. She was holding a golden torch in her right hand with a key embossed on it. She was in awe. She had never seen herself this way before. She was beautiful, triumphantly so. She hardly gave her looks a second thought for the last 7 years. She almost forgot what she looked like, and seeing herself in that way made her want to forget what she had been before this completely. This is who I am. She didn't know exactly what that meant, but it felt right. She recognized that she was seeing her true self for the very first time. She was Stai. Yaman called her Kairu. It's the Tuesday equivalent of saying queen. Am I a queen? In the same thought wave, she wondered what the golden torch was for, but then she knew. Amni Osho, she said. Yes, the orb replied. Its surface rippled, and then the orb began to expand. The bigger it got, the more Kai became a part of it. A spark flew out and lit the torch with a whoosh. This resulted in a big, bright orange flame. Once the orb had completely surrounded Kai, another spark flew out with a whoosh and landed squarely in the eye in the center of Kai's crown. Kai's head was jolted backward from the force of the orb, filling itself into the eye of her crown. Once the orb was completely absorbed, Kai's head became erect, and she stood on those turquoise clouds. Her raven wings were outstretched to the heavens. Her golden crown sparkled like every star of an entire solar system, seen through the gleaming black of her hair. The torch she held lit the entire sky as a signal to the beings watching intently below. The key has arrived in Tuesday. She blinked hard when her memory/dream sequence had stopped, and she realized her small troop of family had stopped also. At that moment, she wanted more than anything to brandish her wings and fly through the skies of Earth. Jasperai put his hand on her shoulder to get her attention. When she looked up, she could see a church several paces beyond the sidewalk, flimsily hidden behind a brush of somewhat blooming bushes, speckled with pale pink and purple flowers. It was a really old, really dilapidated church in the middle of nowhere. She could say the church looked out of place, but she had nothing to compare it to. But the church did look like it was built somewhere else about 1 million years ago, and then plopped on the barren block they were standing. It was breathtaking in that extraordinarily odd-looking. It was breathtaking in that it was extraordinarily odd-looking. Although, even facing it, Kai couldn't describe what she was seeing if she were to be asked later. The smattering of flowers on the band of bushes were really more to see than the church was. But it was dark, so Kai could have been mistaken. It could have been a looker in the light, but she doubted it. She also couldn't figure out where they were exactly. Had she been paying attention, instead of lost in her daydreaming, she would probably know which turns they took to get exactly there. She knew they were still in the city. They hadn't walked that far. But they weren't a block. But they weren't on a block she was familiar with. Everything around it looked broken and uninhabited, as though it had been trapped in an old world time capsule and people were prohibited. There were no cars parked on the street, none drivable nor broken down. There were no plants or trees at all except those that appeared to be trying to hide the church from plain sight. There were shells of old houses and streetlights in the distance, but nothing shared nor lit up the city block stretch of land that the old church sat on. Nothing. When she looked at the weirdly pristine path leading up to the heavy wooden door at the front of the church, something in Kai's heart quickened. She knew this place. The more she looked at it, the more it looked to her like an ancient cathedral. She had been there before, but she couldn't place where. She looked harder to place her surroundings. Her eyes settled on the spiky features that stood before the grand golden dome at the very top. It was grand. It glittered for her, even though there wasn't a speck of light around to reflect its glittering. Kai had to blink a few times because she swore she saw golden light streaming through the center of the dome. She resolved that she was seeing things when the light fizzled in and out, depending on... Oops. Uh-oh. We go back. She then had the weirder feeling that maybe she had never seen this particular cathedral from the outside. Maybe she could only know it from the inside. Could this be cathedral from her yai? Her heart quickened more, and she was flushed with the possibility that she could maybe rectify some questions she still had. To satisfy her curiosity, she shifted toward the big wood door of the church. When she took one step on the slab of concrete in front of her, it turned gold. Lara grabbed Kai's arm gently and pulled her back to the sidewalk. The slab of concrete switched back to its more neutral color. "Not yet," Lara said. "We're here for another reason." "Yeah? Well, something big is pulling me inside, and I think I should go," Kai said, sounding a bit more defiant than she meant to. She was her own boss, after all. "I know. You will. But you must do something first." "Please trust me, Kaiwan," Lara said. She sounded more pleading than she would have liked, but it got the result she wanted. Kai relaxed and hadn't beelined it for the door. Lara let out a vibrant sigh as though she had just defused a bomb. Her relief only lasted a second. Kai was staring so intently at the building, it was hard to get her attention. "Fix it," Lara said, moving herself to stand directly in Kai's sightline. Kai jolted out of her trance. "What?" "Fix it," Lara said again. "It needs to be hidden more properly until the appropriate time. As you can see, it looks tired and cannot protect itself anymore." Kai looked at Lara strangely. "You do know that you sound crazy, right? It's an old church. You're talking like it's an old person. Of course it can't protect itself. It's a building." "This isn't just any old building, Kai. It's the oldest of the oldest old buildings. It's a hideaway of the ancient mystic teachings. This building is the last relic of truth itself on Earth." "So why must it be hidden then? Truth is a good thing, right?" Kai was playing along, but Lara sounded cuckoo. "The truth contained within will be exposed. Everything has its own divine timing. It's not time yet." Lara sounded exasperated again. She forgot that she was dealing with her niece. Kai questioned everything and did not ever simply do what she was told, which she also recognized was a good thing. She wanted to understand what was being asked of her before she did it, which Lara also supposed was her strength as a human. Her lack of trust piled on with her ability to leap into her work while afraid of the unknowns shaped her character. Kai wouldn't be molded into her purpose by anyone other than herself, which was also a really good thing, although it would take them longer to do every single thing they needed to do, Lara thought. "Do you know what to do?" Lara asked. And at the same time, reframing how she approached what was necessary with Kai. She would have her own instructions, and Lara would be better served to prompt her about them rather than tell her what they are. Kai, for her part, didn't say anything. She scanned the lengths of the building in hopes that she would feel what was supposed to come next. The only feeling she got beyond the strangest urge to walk through that door. What was it with her and strange doors anyway? Was the look at the patches of dirt that made up the former front lawn of the church. She kneeled down beside the dirt to get a closer look. It didn't look like much. In fact, it looked more like petrified soil than actual soil. It was so dry and gray, it looked more like old clay, and not because she was looking at it at night. But the closer she looked, and her eyes adjusted to what she thought she was looking at, the more she saw the patterns on the ground. At first, the patterns looked like random swirls. Then she could see the swirls were circles, triangles, and squares, all fused together to form intricate, sacred geometry patterns. There were so many of them, she had to stand up again to fully grasp the intricate details. The fact that she could see them clearly, as though a light in her eyes switched on in the pitch of the no-moon night, was what amazed her most. "Can you guys see this?" Kai asked Jasperai, Kai2, and Lara with excitement. "We can now," Lara said. Kai2 started giggling. "Look at them all." "It is truly amazing that such beauty exists on this planet," Jasperai added honestly. From what he had seen so far, he hadn't many high hopes for the Earth. Lara chose her words specifically. "Can you heal this place?" she asked this time, with only a hint of pleading in her voice. "I have no idea what I'm supposed to heal about it. It's old sacred geometry clay art that's supposed to be a lawn. It looks like it's several thousand years old. Maybe it's supposed to be this way. You want me to blow on it to see if it stands out more or something?" "If that's what you're being called to do," Lara said, holding back the roll that wanted to happen with her eyes. Kai caught Lara's terse tone, so she assumed she had come up with the wrong answer. But maybe she was onto something. Maybe she could do with the dirt what she did with the water in Lara's office building. So she kneeled down again in front of the edge where the clay met the sidewalk and closed her eyes. She breathed in and out a few times until she was calm enough to see what she was missing in the equation. By her third breath, she instinctively chanted out loud, as loudly as it would come out of her throat, "Satnam." The chant bellowed from her mouth and throughout the tiny front courtyard. It seemed to ricochet in front of her as though her words had form. Then it settled neatly around the general area of her third eye. She couldn't see it, but she knew it was there, guiding her. She breathed in and out some more until the words she had spoken, "Truth is my name," words she did not know that she knew, were the only things populating her brain space. She said the words over and over again. "Truth is my name. Truth is my name. Truth is my name." By the third time, it felt like her third eye burst open with the light from her forehead. By the third time, it felt like her third eye burst open and the light from her forehead poured out all of its contents in front of her. When the gush from her head slowed to trickling, and that trickling finally slowed to stop, her entire head plopped forward. She stayed in a kneeling position with her head down for a long while, not moving. What she couldn't see, that the others saw, was the grounds around the cathedral burst into life. The colors began flashing and popping out of everywhere that was dull and barren moments before. Every tree was revived, and every bloom on those trees were flush with bright colors only seen in Aphrodisia. Everything started to breathe at the same time. The old clay that made up the ground in front of the church was revived also into rich, dark, vibrant soil that sprouted fragrant herbs right before their eyes. Each of the sacred geometry designs were filled in with colors of every sort, making their complex patterns known. Then the basilica itself seemed to come alive, and they all marveled at its instant breathing as though it was resuscitated and awake. Soon their breathing and its breathing became one thing. The church's old facade began to change, and by the time Lara had pulled out a small vessel from her pocket, the church itself looked new. "All things made new," she said, just under her breath. The three of them bowed the Om Omni Shakai to the mystic creature disguised as an earth church. Lara quickly filled the purple vessel with some of the fresh soil and tucked it back in her pocket. She then nodded at Jasperai, who scooped Kai in his arms. He kissed her forehead gently as they all walked together in the direction of Lara's building, their new home. When they were beyond its sights, the ancient basilica's lights and colors faded into the dull decor of its surroundings. Only the largest tree, with its long, spanny branches covering the entryway, maintained its vibrant blooms. Though now revived, it was still hiding in plain sight from those not yet ready to see it yet. Oh, haunting. So that is chapter 3, Bo. What do you think? What do you think? We're on chapter 3. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Steve, you missed it. It's over. So let me go in here and see who joined. Let me see what's happening here. Hey, Raj. No ghost. Hey, Imani. Yes. I love Jasper. I too. Okay. Okay, so now we're talking about the ghost. Okay, so that was chapter 3. And now this is question and answer session. So if you have any questions about the first 4 chapters that we read, now would be the time. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Raj. Good. So I'm always tired after I do this. I'm just like tired. Because you see I'm animated and I get excited. And I'm also reading for errors. So like if I see something, I'm drained. So do you have any questions? If you have any questions, now would be the time. Because I'm about to shut it down. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? I'm going to drink my tea right quick. What kind of tea did you bring, Raj? What kind of tea? Because I have chamomile and one of them chamomile. One of them is green tea. And I still have my cup. You're not going to answer? What happened? Okay. So, my loves, star people, we will be back tomorrow. Yes, I know it's Friday, but we'll be back tomorrow at 11:11 to read chapter 4. I wish I could give you a. As you can see, chapter 3 was very deep. Why are you biased? Was that the first time there? So what happens? Okay, that's a really good question, Roz. Thank you. No, on the first book, Kai, and it wasn't explained like it was a third eye. It was just explained like she acquired a talent. So what had happened was, Kai had lived a very normal life. She thought she was just like a regular person, and she, regular people problems and whatever and what have you, and there was an angelic, and you'll meet him. I know, I'm answering the question. Goodness gracious. Oh, okay. You're answering his question. Okay, never mind. Okay, so, Kai, to answer your question, Kai had access to her third eye. Like she has this ability that light pours out of her forehead. And she had access to that from the first book. But it wasn't framed. The conversation wasn't framed as though that was her third eye. It was just kind of like assumed, because it was just when you let's say you catch a new superpower, you have access, you have insight, you catch an insight. You might not be able to define it. You might not have the words for it because it's new, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. So that's essentially what happened in book 1. Kai got access to an insight about herself, and she didn't call it a third eye kind of experience. She was just able to pour light out of her head. And so I'm positive it's a metaphor. So, what you saw was what was read in this chapter was a flashback to book 2, which described essentially what happened when Kai figured out what it truly meant. Like book 1, she knew that she was this higher being, but that didn't mean anything to her. It was just like, okay. And book 2, she actually got an opportunity to know what that looked like, what that felt like. It was a totally different experience. So that's what essentially you got a flashback of what it was like for her when she first found out what being Stai looked like, with the wings and the crown. And the cool thing about her, I guess, her costuming is that part of her costuming, is that there's an eye right in her crown. So, that insight, that having access to that higher realm insight is affixed to her royalty, to her birthright, or whatever you want to call it. So if I'm answering your question appropriately, I'm going to say yes, she's always had access to her third eye, and no, it is not the first time that she's had access to her third eye. But I believe this book 2 was the first time it was actually defined as her third eye. book 1, it was just kind of like light pouring, and book 2, I guess, when you realize it's a focus, and so that's why it was defined that way. I think I wrote it. I wrote it. Yes, Imani has her hands up. I wrote it, but I feel like it was channeled. So I'm going to say that I give my perspective as someone who allowed, you know, the inspiration to come through, but I leave it up to your interpretation, like however it felt for you. But if you haven't read the first 2 books, like that's something I really did have to explain. Yes, Imani, what's your question? And if anyone else has questions, now would be the time to start typing them, because there is a delay. First, why is it posting my stuff twice? I don't know. It's not posting twice to me. And I'm not a Facebook Live. Like, this is literally my 4th time. Wait, yeah, it's like my 4th or 5th time using Facebook Live. I'm not an expert. And what's your... I don't know. The twins aren't even born yet. Okay, so in book 2, we figure out that this is for everybody. In book 2, we figure out that Kai is pregnant with twins right before she's about to leave, and it's a very wonky thing. And just to give you some background, because this book doesn't really give a whole lot of background on the characters that have already been established, because it's kind of like this book is really Kai's you know, internal adjusting. But she has a daughter already who is 7, and she has a lot of powers, and that is dealt with in this book a lot. Like you'll get to meet Kai too. Powers is a strong word. She is a very high vibe child. Like, she's not a regular 7-year-old. I'm not playing. But Kai too, at the end of book 2, Kai 2 said that she knew the names of the twins. Everybody knows that Kai is pregnant with twins, and everybody knows that there's going to be a boy and a girl. And it has a lot to do with, like, the balance of things. And a lot of this stuff will make sense as the book progresses. I don't think that's something that changes. But at the end of book 2, it wasn't hinted. It was very specific that Kai 2, the daughter, the 7-year-old daughter, knew the names of her, you know, forthcoming brother and sister, but she wasn't allowed to tell anybody. And and so book 3, I guess the expectation was that Kai was supposed to have these babies, and she has not yet. So we don't know the names of the twins. And I don't even know if I know the names of the twins. Sometimes I think I do, and I won't know until I write it. And so thank God that book 4 is coming. And just so that you know, I have kind of a hunch that the way these books are coming out is in line, like in alignment with how the chakras, and I wouldn't be surprised, and it's just a hunch, and I won't know until I guess I'm finished the entire thing. But book 1 kind of feels like the first chakra. If you're into that, you can research it. If not, I'm not an expert, but I have a working understanding. Yes, I'll get to you in a second. So book 1 is kind of like the first chakra. It's root chakra. And as you read it, and if you look at it from that perspective, you really see a lot of the stuff that Kai is dealing with in the book is really, you know, survival kinds of things. It's very basic. It's very, and not basic, but I mean, like, she's just, we'll just say root chakra. And so book 2 is very sacral. It deals with sacred sexuality. It deals with a lot, you know, relationships. It deals with a lot of things that you would deal with in your, you know, from a sacral point of view. So it's very second chakra. And then book 3 is very solar plexus. It's will. And you see a lot of it in this book. It's very willpower. It's very, you know, I'm going to make it happen kind of thing. And what's cool about it is that by the end of the book, as you will see, things evolve. And so I'm getting the impression that this series kind of goes up through the chakras. And so the first 3 books, there may actually be 8 or 9 because from from the Stai standpoint, there aren't just 7 chakras. And the way it's framed, and to answer your question, Raj, the way it's framed is like the first 3 chakras, when you're in those 3 chakras, you can't even deal with what's next. And then the gateway chakra is chakra 4, which is the heart chakra. And so that's kind of the gateway to the next 3, which is the throat, third eye, and the crown. So there's 3 right here, and then there's supposedly an 8th chakra that's whatever's beyond that, and then some people say they're 11. Like, I don't know. And like I said, I'm open to all of the interpretations, but I'm just going to go with the flow of how this series goes. So you have the Stellar Trilogy, and the reason why it's framed that way, it's the Stellar Trilogy. It's not Stellar Trilogy, it's the Stellar Trilogy. That's the first 3 chakras. I'm in my head. And then book 4 is the beginning of the stellar universe. And even though it's not necessarily part of the trilogy, it's the gateway to the next 3, which will all be a part of the stellar universe from that point. So it'll be book 3 is the one thing that's like the basics, and now you're talking about onward. Okay, so Imani had a question: where can I find a Jasperite? Girl, if I knew. I don't know. How am I gonna tell you where you find a Jasperite if I ain't find a Jasperite? And I wrote about him. Come on, boo boo. That's funny. Maybe he'll join this discussion at some point. All of them. Maybe there's like a whole tribe of Jasperites. So, did I answer your question, Raj? There will probably be 8 or 9 or 10. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. He was asking. Oh, you can see. Everybody can see. I'm acting like y'all can't see. Any more questions? Steve, did you read? Going once? Going twice? Oh, what happened? Okay, my loves. Well, if there are no more... Oh, wait, word. Hi. Maybe it's just a delay. I don't know. So, if there aren't any more questions, I am going to take it down. Thank you so much. Today was even awesome because the question and answer is just... Oh, thank you, Raj. Today, I love the question and answer. Like, that just made my whole night. So thank you so much. I am so looking forward to tomorrow. And I will, she's at her dad's. I'm so looking forward to tomorrow, 11:11, same bat station. I guess I should say, same Star People station, same Star People time. Yeah, that's it. So tomorrow, 11:11, and we'll pick up on chapter 4, which is called Green. And this one is a heady one too, but it's fun. I think this is the one where she fixes the food. Or maybe not. I don't know. Always a surprise. Okay, guys, thank you so much, so much for listening and for your attention and for your great questions and for participating and for this. I love you. I will see you mañana. Oh, and don't forget, 11:11 in the morning, we do Stop, Drop, and Meditate, and that will continue. So I will, if you want to, I'll be there tomorrow. Same bat. Star People station for Stop, Drop, and Meditate, 11:11 a.m. Okay, so I'm rambling. That's how you know I'm tired. Mwah. Lovianhal Star People. I'll see you later.